Hello, my name is Emma and today I'm going to show you how to make an attic windows. But first I'm going to let you know a little bit about myself. So I've been quilting for, about 23 years now. I learnt in my very early 20s, so I'm not as old as that. But it's something that I always wanted to do. And I finally met a lady when I was in my early 20s who offered to teach me. And I have been hooked ever since. And so I really love to teach others how to do it because I wasn't able to earlier in my life. So now is my chance to show other people how to do exactly the same thing that I love and do. So what are we going to do today? Well, we are going to make this beautiful, I'm going to show you how to make this beautiful attic windows quilt. Thank you. So it's called attic windows simply because it is designed, this block is designed to look like a window pane. So it's very effective with fabric that looks like a scenery in the background, which is what this is. Now this is a Robert Kaufman fabric, and in this colorway it has a beautiful silver foil accent to it. But I also have it, well let me show you this is in the periwinkle. Now this fabric, typically for this kind of attic windows quilt, you would use a panel. So a panel is a set length of fabric, usually about 60 centimeters or 90 centimeters, with the pattern running from selvage to selvage. This fabric, however, is in one continuous length. So you're not limited to how wide your quilt can be because this fabric is literally yardage. So let me turn you around and I'll show you. So you can see this is the fabric as it comes off the bolt. And you can see there is no repeat anywhere where it tells you to cut, which normally happens in a panel. So you can have it 75 centimeters wide, or a meter, or 2 meters, however much you want it. So the pattern runs just like that, and then the bottom part you'll see runs along that bit. So, which is what I love about this fabric. So this is in the periwinkle. Now, this is available on my Swift Quilting website right now for you to buy. And like I said, you'll buy it as a meterage. So you buy it by the quarter meter. So if you want 1 meter, you would add 4 units to make a meter. If you want 3/4 of a meter, you add 3 units, and so on. Now that's it in the periwinkle. Today, I'm going to show you how to actually cut this fabric up to make the panel, the attic windows, but I'm going to use the taupe gold colorway. Now the way that I'm going to show you how to cut the window panes, you can use this technique for any panel to make attic windows that you'd like. I'm just going to show it on this fabric today. So again, this is 3/4 of a meter, so 75 centimeters. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to fold it just like we would normal fabric yardage to cut into strips. So what I'm doing right now is that I am matching up my selvage edges, making sure that my fabric is nice and smooth all the way through the fold. There's no wrinkles anywhere. And then I'm just going to match up my selvage to my fold, just like that. Now I'm ready to cut into strips. Now this, we know, is 75 centimeters. Now typically, when I cut up strips, or with most quilts, you use a metric system. So normally a pattern would tell you to cut it into a certain number of inches and a certain number of strips, so usually 2.5 inch strips or things like that. So it's usually imperial measurements. But to cut my natural attic windows, I'm actually going to use metric. And that's just because the numbers divide up much easier that way. So if this is 75 centimeters long, so 3/4 of a meter, I need 3 strips which are 25 centimeters wide. So I'm going to match up my fabric to one of the lines. I'm going to clean up my edge. I want to waste as little as possible because I want to get the most out of my lovely fabric as I possibly can. So just trimming up this edge to make it a nice, clean, neat cut. Ooh, be careful, because we don't want to disturb that fabric. Because what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use the measurements on my mat, because these are all in centimeters. So I'm going to go at the 25 centimeter line. So that's 25 centimeters. And I'm going to do 50 centimeters. Right, now, so usually when I am cutting, I have a slightly larger cutting mat. So I'm going to move these aside because I need to shift my last one carefully. Cut that, cut. Make sure to keep those strips in order. Then for my last one, if I place this on the 25 centimeter line, I can then cut it at the 50, which it just about is. There. So it's practically perfect. Just need to trim up that edge. Just like that. Right. So those are my 3 strips cut in order. Now, again, if you want to purchase this fabric, the kits will be available, or they are available, so that when you buy the kit, you get everything that you need to make this quilt in this colorway, and then the equivalent is available to make in the gold and taupe. So you'll be able to make it exactly as I'm demonstrating you right now. So you'll be able to make the exact same quilt. Right. So now that you've cut your 3 strips, so you need to, first of all, make sure to keep your sections in order, because we're going to number them. But if we open them out like so, that's my last strip. This is my middle strip. And I'm going to make sure they're directly on top of each other. Everything is all lined up because we're going to cut them all together. And there's the last one. Good. Make sure that that is, there we go, just like that. Okay, so I've got my first strip on top, my second one in the middle, and my last one on the bottom. So just remember that. And then what we're going to do, because the yardage is 54 centimeters, 108 centimeters wide, you need to cut them. Each square, each rectangle, each window pane is going to be 25 centimeters wide, which is you just cut for the strips, and then 27 centimeters tall. So that's what I'm going to cut right now, again, using the lines on my board. So I'm going to cut my 27 centimetre line first. Just like that. I'm going to trim up my selvage edges, just like that. Snip those extra bits. There we go. So I'm going to put those aside for now. And then these last ones, we need to make sure. So I'm going to open up my bottom strip first. And square it up. My second strip on top of that, so that we keep them in order. And I'm keeping them in all the same direction as well. So the bottom of my trees, the tree trunks are this side, and my tops of my trees are this side on all of them. Just like that. And then my last strip. Just like that. And now we'll be able to divide that exactly, because that is up to 54 centimetres there. So I'm going to cut at 27 right in the middle. And then that will be all of my attic windows cut. Now if you were doing this on a fabric that isn't like this, if you were using a panel, the way that you work out how big, how tall and how wide your window panes need to be, sorry, is you need to measure the width of the fabric from the edge of the selvage to the edge of the selvage. So don't include the selvage edges. You want to measure from where the printed fabric is on one end to the other end of the printed fabric. Don't include the selvage edges. And then you need to divide that number by the amount of window panes you want to do. So in my case, I did 4 window panes going up and down the width of the fabric. Once you know how many window panes you want going bottom to top, then you work out how many window panes you want going horizontally. So for mine, I did 3, and each window pane is 25 centimetres wide. But if you're working in inches and you had a 60-inch panel, for instance, that was 60 inches wide or 60 inches long, then you could easily divide them into 20 inches per window pane if you wanted to. Or you could do 15 if you wanted 4 going across. So, let's see now. I've got all of my panes. So this is 1, 2, 3 at the top. Move this out of the way. Once you've cut all of your window panes, the next part is really important, is to recreate your panel and then to place a number. I just pinned a number. So if I take one square that I've done off my other one. So I've just got a scrap of paper that I've put a number on, and I've numbered all of my window panes in order so that I know which way that they need to go back together. Because it's quite easy on this kind of a pane to get them out of place, because the pattern is quite similar. If you had a more obvious pattern on your window pane panel, then that wouldn't be so much of a problem. Yeah. There we go. So 2, move this out of the way. There we go. So that is my panel all cut up into 12. There. So now that my panel is all laid out, it's at this point that I would number them. And I did it, so this is the bottom of the panel, this is the top. I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So that's that. So now that I've said that, let me put them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8, 9, and then 10, 11, and 12. Now I'm going to put those aside for now because I don't need those, but I've got them in order from the top to the bottom, 1 through 12, so that when I lay them out again, I know which order they're all going to go into. So the next step, once you've got all of your panels cut, is to cut the sashing that's going to go on 2 sides. Yep, that's right. So this is what your block is going to look like. So this is a block with sashing on the extra sashing on the bottom. But what your attic windows block, the basic block, will look like is this. So you've got your window pane and then 2 pieces of sashing joined by a Y seam in the corner. Now don't be afraid of Y seams because I'm going to show you exactly how to do them and you'll get them perfectly every time. So I've done this attic window block a little bit differently from the quilt behind me, in that on this quilt I've got the light side, the light sashing on the side and the darker one on the bottom. On this quilt I have changed it around. So I've got the pale sashing on the bottom of the block and the darker sashing running up the side. The only thing that changes is when you have your attic window completely finished, it'll have a different light perspective slightly, but I wanted to do it both ways because you can do it either way, it's just personal preference, but this way you'll be able to see it one way and the other. So if I put that aside for now, this is the block I'm going to work with. So this is my pale sashing. Now, with the kit that you purchased from the website, there will be some basic instructions in there on width of sashing that you need to cut and how to cut it. But this is how you're going to, once you've got your strips cut for your sashing, you need to cut a 45-degree angle line on it. One thing is very important, you need to make sure that your sashing, you don't cut them all the same way, and then when you do cut your sashing with the angle on one end, make sure your fabric is facing up every time. So if I grab one of the dark sashings, it should be here, should be here. It was here a minute ago. It'll turn up. I'll show you. We'll cut the pale one first. So I'm going to cut the pale sashing that runs along the bottom of the block. And so I'm going to cut my 45-degree angle, just lining up. So what I've done is I've just lined up my strip using the edge on my mat, and I'm going to use a 45-degree line on my mat. You can use your ruler with a 45-degree line on it, but I find it much easier to actually do it using the mat. So I'm just going to line up my ruler with that line and then just cut across. There we go. So I've got that, and then I need my sashing to be 12 inches. So in this pattern, with the pattern that you'll get with the kit, the instructions, I do mix up metric measurements and imperial, but don't be afraid. The metric is just for cutting up the panel piece itself, so that's when you'll use your centimeters measurements to cut up your window panes themselves. Everything else is in good old-fashioned inches, so it won't be confusing when you actually go to put your quilt together. The centimeters are only for cutting out your window panes, so don't worry. So I've cut my sashing, and this one is going to go right there. You can see from my other block, if I put this side by side, let me turn it around so you can actually see it, just like that. So that's my pale sashing, hide that under there. That's my pale sashing that's going to go on the bottom of the window, which corresponds to this one right here. Now your grey sashing, you're going to cut a little bit longer, and then when you cut the 45-degree angle on it, you're going to want to make sure that your 45-degree angle is going the opposite direction. So you'll need to cut it opposite so that they're opposite from each other. So then they will nest very nicely, just like that. If I fold that over. That's very important. So when cutting sashing, two important things. One is make sure that your fabric strip is facing up, because then you'll know that you're cutting the angle in the correct direction every time. And also make sure that your pale sashing and your darker sashing are cut at angles that are opposite from each other. So one will need to go one way, one will need to go the other way. Now in your kit, you'll have enough of your pale and your darker sashing to make your pale sashing on either side, or your dark sashing on either side. So you can either choose it this way, or like the kit is on the blue quilt. Right. So next thing I'm going to do, oh, wrong bit. This is the bit I need. So I'm going to use my multi-mat for this. And my multi-mat, if you haven't discovered one, oh, I love it, I love it, love it. So the first thing about the multi-mat is you have a nice colourful outer. And this is a little bit padded. So that's actually folds out to make it into an ironing mat, a pressing mat, which I love. And then on the inside, when you open it up, you've got two things. You have a handy dandy small little cutting mat in there. And then on the other side, which I love, so this is a little moleskin divider, which is great for putting your cut pieces of fabric or your blocks inside, and it holds it together. But this piece, that is sandpaper, which nobody would ever think you'd need for quilting, but it's great for marking on. So I always use my multi-mat and my sandpaper when I want to mark pencil lines on the back of fabric, which is what I'm going to do right now. So I've got my attic window. You're going to want to, on the bottom left-hand corner of each of your window panes, what you need to do, which I've already done here, you're going to want to measure 1/4 inch in and up on your corner, and just place a little dot, little pencil dot. So I'm going to put that right there. So you're going to have a little pencil dot, which is 1/4 inch in and up. That's that piece. And then we want to repeat that same thing on your sashing, on the angled corner. Now, it's going to look a bit weird because of the angle, but I don't know if you can see this. What I'm going to do, I need to position my 1/4 inch from the actual corner of the end of the sashing. So if this is the end of my sashing, where it slopes down, I want to measure 1/4 inch down and over. So that's what my tool does here. That's measured down and over. I'm going to put a little dot. Now you can see that's where my dot is, which looks weird because it's clearly 1/4 inch from this edge, but it's more than 1/4 inch from this edge. That's okay. That's what it's supposed to look like. It needs to be 1/4 inch in from this corner, so don't panic. Right, move that aside for now. Now, once you've got your two dots, you're going to pin directly through one dot on your sashing, and that will go directly through the dot on your attic window. So I've got it going through one dot on my sashing and through the dot on my attic window so that everything is all lined up. There. I'm going to pin it so it stays in place. There. Now, very importantly, when I sew this, what I want to do is I'm going to start actually on that dot. So my first stitch is going to be from that dot so that I don't actually sew into this side of the seam allowance. So if I leave it pinned, I'm going to position it under my presser foot, just like that. There we go. Very carefully lower my needle down into that dot, move my pin out of the way so I don't sew over it. And at this point, depending on the sewing machine you've got, if you've got a sewing machine that does a lock stitch, I would start with a lock stitch. If you don't have a machine with a lock stitch and you just can go forwards and backwards, what I would do is go forwards a couple of stitches and then go back 2 stitches and then lock it in place that way. So I've done 1 stitch, I'm going to do that method now, 2 stitches, and then hit my back button, 1, there, just like that. Do not sew past behind that dot. So now I'm going to continue. So 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way along otherwise, and when you get to the end, quite happily run over your attic window, so you want to seam all the way to the end. Lift my needle up, there we go. Oh, I'm stuck. There we go. So if I trim that up, you might be able to see it a little better. So now I've got my sew line, and you can see that my sewing has gone just to that dot and then all the way along here, but you don't want to go this way. You want to leave this little edge free. So you'll have your 1/4 inch that is completely unsewn, but you've got your lock stitch there in that corner to keep it right. So now that I've done that, I'm going to press that seam open. See. There we go. Just pressing my stitches to set them in place first, and then just opening that out. There we go. Okay. So it's going to look like this. It's going to be open at the end there. So, really need you to find my other piece of grey sashing. So, okay. Perfect. So, next bit is to attach the grey part of the sashing. Okay, we're going to pretend. Okay, so in order to show you the Y seam, which is very important, I'm going to pretend that this white strip of fabric is actually grey. So bear with me. I will show you it in the grey later on. But remember, we cut our line. So our line on this sashing is going. So the one that we just added is going in this direction. I now need to cut it the opposite way. So it will need to go this way. So it needs to be cut. I'm going to cut my length first, which is 13 inches. So I'm going to cut my strip first, and then I'm going to line it up here. So I'm lining it up so that my corner right here is right on to that 45-degree angle line, because I now want to cut it this direction. There we go. Just like that. There. Now you can see what I mean by you need to make sure you cut your angles in opposite directions. So one will be going this way, and this should be grey, but your grey one will be going in this direction, so that when they slot together, they fit just like that. Now I'm going to mark a dot on my sashing, just like I did with the other one. Okay. So 1/4 inch down and in, just mark it in the corner, just like that. Okay, move that out of the way. So for this one, line it up like that. I'm going to do exactly the same thing I did before. Pin straight through the dot on my sashing, and then pin straight through the dot on my attic windows. Line up those edges nicely. Go, just like that. Now, there are a couple of ways you can do this. You can either start from this end and sew onto your dot, or you can start this end and go that way. I tend to prefer to start on the dot, because then I know that I have not stitched past that. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing. Position that dot directly underneath my needle, gently put down. My pin out. Okay. 2 stitches forward, 2 stitches back, and then continue 1/4 inch all the way across. I'm not going to press it at this point, so I'm going to snip that off. There we go. Snip that bit there. So I've actually stitched a little bit behind where I wanted to, which isn't the end of the world. What I'm going to do is just undo that stitch right there, because I want that corner bit to be completely free. There we go. So I've got stitches all the way up to the dot, and then what I do, I need to sew across that angle. And in order to match that up perfectly, you're going to fold your block kind of like a handkerchief. So fold it in half diagonally from corner to corner. Snip that bit, got caught. There we go. There. So you'll see that your seams, your raw edges rather, on your sashing, once you fold it that way, they will match up perfectly. Just like that. And then in order to keep that in place between now and when I get it to the sewing machine, I'm just going to put a pin in it just to hold it in place. And then I actually start from the pointy end. So 1/4 inch seam allowance. There we go. Gently all the way up to my dot again, and then back a bit. Oh, there we go, back stitch. Perfect. Snip those out, and that's what it should look like. Cut my threads off. So you can see this is how you stitch a Y seam. So my sashing, I've only gone up to that dot going this direction. I've only gone up to the dot that direction. And then my corner, is absolutely free of any stitching. So my corner is free. These aren't sewn together there at all. And then when we press it out, we have a beautiful Y seam. Just the wrong colours, but it's a beautiful Y seam all the same. Get my iron. So press my stitches in place first, and then just open that out, just like that. Now when it comes to the point and deciding which way to press your seam allowance, one way or the other, it doesn't matter. I always say press it the way that it wants to go, because in general there'll be a certain side that it wants to lay on, and it might not even be the same side on all of your blocks. It depends how you've sewed that particular Y seam. So I don't fight with it. I just open it out, and whichever way that that seam allowance wants to go, I let it go. So just like that. Straight from the iron. Oh well. There we go. And that is what your block will look like. Obviously, you have to pretend that this particular block is pale sashing on this side and then dark sashing up the side, but we'll ignore that for now. Once you've got all of your attic windows blocks sewn, then you need to square them up. So you'll see on the instructions that I'll give you, or you'll have in the kit, the sashing is intentionally longer than your block, and that is so that you can square them up nicely. Once they're done, you don't have to worry about making sure that that sashing is exactly the same length as your block, because it all gets squared up before you put them together. So that's your block. Actually, let me square that up because I'm going to need it. So just trim off that end there. What I'm looking at when I square this piece of sashing off is I'm going to line up my ruler with the raw edge of my block, making sure everything's square. You can also use your lines. I'm using the 1/2 inch dots along my ruler in the middle there to make sure they're all lined up with the edge of the sashing, which they are beautifully. Trim that off. And do the same right here. Now this is my first block. This is the next block up that I'm going to have. So these are going to be attached to each other. And so I'm going to want to add the sashing now. Now on the blue, the sashing is all the way around, but the only part that's visible is the piece in the middle, because the edge sashing blends into the border. For this one, the sashing is black. So let me grab my sashing piece. So I've cut all my sashing ready. So I've got strips the width of the block always on the top and the bottom, and then I'm going to add long strips. So this piece of the sashing on the quilt is one continuous length. These pieces are your shorter. So here to here is a shorter piece of sashing that you've attached to the block, which is what I'm going to do now. And that's just straightforward. 1/4 inch seam allowance. The instructions, you'll have how wide they need to be, and you will cut them to that width rather than needing to trim them down. Go. The thing I also love most about this quilt is your blocks are quite large. There's really 2 seams, well 3 seams if you count the little Y seam as well. And so if you want to have a project that goes really quickly, this is the one for you. Or if you want to take your time on it, that's fine as well. But it does go together really quickly. And with the the beautiful fabric, it really is effective. So I'm going to attach this onto here as well. And then, a la Blue Peter, I will pull out the rest of it, which is already done, so you can see the full effect. So, lining up. So, in 1/4 of an inch. Open. There we go. Okay, so those are in effect my 2 bottom pieces. If I show you the rest, so to put this attic windows together, what I've done is I've sewn all the blocks in strips that run vertically. So if I do this last one, that will be one last strip. So you can see. Really want to get this attic windows finished for you so that you can see the gold versus the periwinkle. There we go. Press that out quickly. So, I'll probably pin this up for you actually on the quilt so you can see the whole thing. But that is one strip. So you'll have 3 strips which look like this. And then to those, oh, it's here, you will add your length of black sashing. So this is to make your window sashing, your window panes in between. And then the third one, make sure I get it the right way. Yes, that is the right way. So this one is actually the last one that goes on the edge. There. So that's what it looks like all together. Let me just pin it up for you quickly, if I can. Okay. There we go. I can just about reach, maybe. There we go. There we go. Yeah. And again, this kit is available on the Swift Quilting website, in the periwinkle and in the taupe. And that's how you can keep in touch with us as well. So we'll have a workshop on this in February, so you can come and make it with me. And I promise the sashings will be the correct colour when I demonstrate it there. There we go. So that is the taupe version. So let me just shift this out of the way a little bit, because we'll be doing some. So you can see the taupe. I do love that colour. Now, for the borders for that, I have decided to go very different. So, the leaves that go on the corners, this is what the leaves will be like that go with this one. So if I put one up, let me see, if I put one up, there we go. Oh yeah, oh, yes, sorry. This one is. There we go, that's better. That's more like it. Can't have upside down trees. There we go, perfect. So, the leaf blocks. So the leaf blocks are really just the accent that go in the corners and very straightforward to put together. The only bit that is a little bit tricky is the tip, the leaf tip, which actually there are templates in the pattern that you will use, which look like this. Obviously, these are the templates that I've made out of my own template plastic, so you will need cereal cardboard or some template plastic to draw them out. But these are the two shapes that you have. So those, and then also for the leaf stem, there is another little piece, which is just appliqued on. So I've just used the Bonder Wed method to applique those on. So I'll lay out these pieces. Now this one is a little bit simpler. So the fabric that I used on the blue quilt is actually a Moda ombre. So it's actually an ombre fabric, which is from pale blue all the way to dark blue, which gives you that really lovely different color effects, almost like frost. But this one I've gone with the whole solid, which is actually a little bit simpler to make. Let's do these. And the way that you get the points, so this is very straightforward piecing. What you're going to do is, on the squares of the background, you need to draw a diagonal line. So we're going to do the method of sewing a square onto a rectangle, sewing it diagonally, and then cutting the extra off to make our angled points for all the leaves. So if I do you a couple, now the thing I want you to be really careful of for this one is you need to make sure that your angles, again, are going in opposite directions. So you're going to need 6 units like this altogether, 3 going one way and 3 going the other. So these are my other rectangles. We'll see if I get to those. Let me sew these. So I've marked a diagonal line directly across the square. Now, I'm just going to sew. Okay. So there's one. So there's no real angles to worry about too much with these ones, except do make sure that they're going in opposite directions. Otherwise, you're going to have 6 which are all the same, and it's not going to work. Do that. There we go. There we go. So I'm going to be quick and easy. Just trim off that extra. Make sure you cut off the correct side, so it's the corner tip that you're going to cut off, so that it'll look like that. And then one going the opposite direction. There we go. Quick press out. And then I'm going to show you quickly the tip. There we go. So you'll have 2 that look like that. So you want 3 pairs of rectangles that look like that. So put those aside for now. And then for the tip, using your templates, and again, if you have the multi-mat, this makes it really easy, because what you're going to do is mark, here we go, it's my fabric. Use your template and just trace around. You don't need to leave any edges or anything. You just want to trace around with a pencil your shape. There we go. And I'm not going to cut it all out, but with that shape, you will cut directly onto that line to cut those out. And you're going to need 8 of those altogether. And I have mine already here. With the other 2 little triangles, it's a little bit, well, you have to be careful again. So I've got my background fabric. When you mark these, you have to make sure, so if I mark these, you can mark them in squares, in pairs rather, together, so that you get the most out of your fabric as you can. So I'm going to mark all the way around one. And then you can lay the other one directly up against where you've just marked. So you'll just have one cut line between the 2, line them up like that. And that will give you one side. And then your next one, you want to make sure, so that's going that direction. And now I want to do a pair which go in this direction. Because you want one triangle one way and one triangle the other way. There we go. There we go. And again, just mark on the line, but just make sure, I don't know if you can see the markings on that, it's a little bit faint, but you do need to make sure that you've got 2 triangles which go in opposite directions from each other. So one way and one the other way, because these, if you look, they won't fit together. They have to be opposite. And those will go on either side. Let's see. Hopefully I have just enough time to show you this bit, because this bit, when you sew it up, the tip looks a little bit strange. So I want to show you what it should look like, so that there we go. I'm just going to give that a quick finger press out. Okay. So when you line this up, it's not going to be an easy angle to line up. You want to, when you're lining it up, you're going to poke your triangle 1/4 inch over your edge of your tip. So when you start, it's going to be already over the edge, and that's how it's going to match up. My fingers, so there we go. There we go. Press it out. Right, now I am going to properly press it out. I'm going to move all my mess out of the way so we don't get confused. Do a John. There we go. So, this tip of your leaf, okay. So, you end up with a shape that looks a little bit strange. So you've got quite a bit pointy edges coming out of here. But don't worry, all you do is you trim it up. And you need to trim that up to, should be 3.5 inches square. It's all done. So if I got that there, and I'm measuring 3.5 inches, the corner of my 3.5 inch square, I want to be directly at the bottom here so that I'm trimming anything off the top. Let's see, there we go. Trim all those funny edges off. And it's just the angle of the piece of the fabric that you sew together which makes all that extra happen. But once you trim it all off, there we go. And then you can trim off your dog ears that happen here. There we go. There we go. Perfect. So if I get the block off the quilt, there we go. I can show you. Ah! There we go. So this tip that I've just done is one that goes right here, just like that. So if I try and recreate my block somewhat to look like this one, so you've got my square in the corner. I'll have 6 of these, but these go like that. And then you'll have another pair which go like that. And then you'll have one which goes like here. And then these, basically, like that. And then you'll have one 3.5-inch square of background in the bottom here. And your stem is just bond-webbed. So I've just bond-webbed mine on. There we go. So on my finished block, I haven't actually finished the applique. I've just pressed on my stem at the bottom. So the bond-webbed stem, you apply last. Once your block is all finished, your bond-webbed stem goes on last, and then you can applique around the edge. So I'm just going to go do a straight stitch, but you can do a blanket stitch, whatever you'd like, just to keep that stem in place. Using a matching colour, just going to do a little bit of raw edge applique, just to finish it. Okay, do a little lock stitch on the last bit, just set that in place. There we go. Trim, trim, trim. There we go. Oop. And that's my block all finished. So you'll have 8 of those all together, and then what you'll do is you'll have strips of border that you add. Again, all the instructions will be in the kit, and I hope that you have enjoyed this demonstration. And the Y seams are a little bit less scary than they were. How you can find me? So going forward, I am at Swift Quilting. So it's a Swift Quilting company, and you can find us online. Thank you very much for watching, and go to our website and see what's going on. We have lots of workshops coming up. We have lots of lovely fabric that's available for you. Multi-mats, we always have multi-mats in, so those, I love those, I love those. But yes, thank you very much.